I was standing by the chocolate fountain when she spotted me. The gala was exactly as I'd imagined, over-decorated, overhyped, and emotionally empty. It was my nephew Daniel's engagement party. Daniel, the family's forever prodigy, had just gotten engaged to Olivia Crane, a woman whose smile was polished to perfection and whose tone could slice glass. She lifted her glass of Prosecco and tilted her head. "Daniel said you're in the Navy?" she asked sweetly. "That must be exhausting. What do you do? Paperwork? Scheduling?" I smiled politely. "Something like that." It was easier to let people assume. The uniform had always spoken louder than the title, and tonight I wasn't wearing it. Olivia's laughter rang out. "Oh, right! Daniel mentioned you're in naval architecture? So you decorate ships, right?" The table erupted in light laughter. Daniel looked away, his ears turning red. I didn't bother glancing at him. Instead, I turned to the man beside Olivia, her father, Mr. Crane, chairman of Aegis Defense Systems. "No," I said calmly, setting down my glass. "I command them." Silence sliced through the room. Mr. Crane's fork froze mid-air. He lowered it slowly. "Command," he repeated, his voice suddenly level. "As in—" "Vice Admiral Liora Keene," I replied evenly. The air changed. Olivia's smile vanished. Daniel looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. But that wasn't the start of this. That moment was simply the end of a smaller betrayal, one that had begun 3 weeks earlier with a phone call from my sister Evelyn. "Liora, darling," she'd said, voice tight with worry. "Daniel's engagement is such a big event. The Cranes are very connected. We were hoping you wouldn't wear your uniform. It might feel intimidating. And please, no talk about ranks or deployments. Just say you work in logistics." I'd listened quietly, realizing she wasn't just asking me to downplay my career. She was asking a 3-star admiral to pretend she hadn't earned every star. To stay small so a defense executive could feel tall. That night, I decided, silence would no longer be my service. A contractor who, incidentally, was already under procedural review by my office. To understand the reckoning that followed, you have to understand the 2 lives they forced me to live. To my family, I was just Lilo, a nickname they'd given me in college, short for Little Liora, like I'd never quite grown up. It made them feel comfortable, I suppose. It kept me in a box, small, unthreatening, forgettable, while they worshipped my nephew Daniel, the golden child of the Keene family. Daniel was the real success, the finance prodigy with a corporate card and a LinkedIn full of buzzwords. Every promotion he got was treated like a national holiday. I remember Christmas of 2029. Daniel unwrapped a Platinum Omega watch, a gift from his parents for changing the company's investment outlook. The whole family oohed and awed, passing it around like it was the Holy Grail. My gift was a pink coffee mug with Office Queen scrawled across it in glitter. They laughed. "Perfect for your little desk job, Lilo." I smiled. I didn't mention that, 48 hours earlier, I'd been in a secure briefing with the Joint Chiefs, approving strategic readiness reports for the Pacific Fleet. Thanksgiving was no different. Dinner was a 3-hour sermon on Daniel's stock portfolio. I made the mistake of mentioning that I'd just wrapped a multinational maritime exercise between Japan, the Philippines, and Australia. My sister Evelyn had smiled her polished hostess smile. "That's nice, dear," she said for everyone to hear. "Like, arranging cruises?" The table laughed. I sipped my wine. They saw a cruise planner. But the next morning, that cruise planner walked into a windowless command center at Pearl Harbor, the heart of Indo-Pacom. In that room, I wasn't Lilo. I was Vice Admiral Liora Keene. I stood before a sea of officers, captains, intelligence chiefs, cyber analysts, the hum of monitors vibrating like a pulse through the room. "Listen up," I said. "Silent Trident is live. I want full ISR convergence on sectors Delta through Kilo by 0400. Dozens of heads snapped to attention. This wasn't a family dinner anymore. This was the line between peace and provocation, and the ocean answered to me. A face flickered to life on the main video screen. It was General Marcus Heller, a 4-star Air Force commander, my operational counterpart in the Pacific. Heller wasn't a man who wasted words, and he certainly wasn't the kind who cared about pink mugs or family dinner jokes. Admiral Keene's assessment is airtight, he said flatly to the room. You have your orders. Execute as planned. There were no novelty mugs here, no laughter about desk jobs or cruise planning, only mission, precision, and the quiet, hard-earned respect of people who carried the weight of continents on their shoulders. Hours later, I sat in the back of a secure convoy vehicle, the post-briefing silence pressing against the windows. Outside, Honolulu's lights shimmered against the ocean, 1,000 tiny reflections of everything I couldn't tell my family about. On my encrypted tablet, I reviewed deployment grids, the kind of documents that dictated the movement of carrier groups and aircraft wings. Then, from the seat beside me, my personal phone buzzed, the one they all knew as Lilo's phone. It felt like a knock from a smaller, pettier world. I picked it up. The message glowed against the dark cabin light. Hey Lilo, just checking. Mom told you about the no uniform thing, right? Seriously, don't make it weird. Olivia's dad is a major defense CEO. Don't make it weird. I thought of the fleet repositioning under my command, ships, pilots, submariners following my word across 6 time zones. Olivia's father might run a defense corporation, but I was his client. A slow, steady anger settled beneath my ribs. I typed one word: acknowledged. Then I set the phone face down and reopened the tactical map. For years, I'd drawn lines between my two identities. Liora Keene, the polite relative, and Vice Admiral Liora Keene, commander of the Pacific Fleet. But this time, their no uniform request wasn't just ignorant, it bordered on interference. Asking me to pretend, to mislead a defense contractor, was a security breach waiting to happen. That night, something inside me clicked into place. The anger was gone. All that remained was precision, cold, measured, unshakable. For years, I'd tried to make them understand. Now, I'd let reality do the talking. A new strategy crystallized in my mind. I wouldn't explain myself anymore. I'd let reality do the talking. And the engagement party, their chosen stage, would be the perfect arena. No anger, no confrontation, just quiet, deliberate action. Back at Pearl Command, I logged into the secure naval contracting system. My fingers flew over the keyboard. Crane Defense Systems. Evelyn, my sister, had been right about one thing. Olivia's father was a major player. As I scanned through the active contracts, one familiar file name froze me. Project Atlas, a multi-billion-dollar logistics initiative supporting fleet modernization, and coincidentally, under mandatory review. The authority to finalize that review rested in one office, mine. Daniel wasn't the only one trying to impress a crane that week. I pressed the intercom. Commander Vega, I said. Lieutenant Commander Elias Vega appeared moments later, professional, composed, the kind of officer who understood subtext without needing it spelled out. I'll be attending a social function this weekend, I said, eyes still on the screen. Mr. Crane will be present. Prepare a full brief on Project Atlas. You'll accompany me. Vega nodded. Full service dress, Admiral? Correct. Representational capacity. He smiled faintly, the kind that said message received. By Saturday afternoon, the plan was in motion. I honored my sister's request. Technically, no uniform, just a clean navy blue dress and understated pearl earrings. I saw Evelyn spot me across the reception hall. Relief washed over her face, a small approving nod. The look you give a stubborn child who's finally learned to behave. She saw Lilo, the quiet relative with the cute maritime job, safely defanged. What she didn't realize was that I'd never come unarmed. In my world, compliance is camouflage. The trap was already set. The bait was me. Back at the table, Olivia was mid-punchline. "So what, you decorate ships or something?" She laughed. The table followed. I felt the familiar burn under my ribs, the expectation that I'd smile, nod, and shrink to fit their comfort. Not tonight. If you felt that moment of quiet power with me, don't let it fade here. Subscribe and join me in the next chapter, where silence turns into strategy and truth finally takes the stage. But this time was different. The plan was already in motion. I took a slow breath and let the silence hang a moment longer than comfort allowed. The air between us tightened. I didn't look at Olivia. I didn't look at Daniel, who sat rigid beside her, cheeks burning with secondhand shame. I looked directly at her father, Mr. Crane. "No," I said, my voice steady and even. "I don't decorate ships." The words were soft, but they sliced through the hum of champagne laughter and violin music. "I command them." The dance floor music dimmed as if it knew to step aside. Olivia's laugh faltered mid-syllable, freezing on her lips. Her eyes darted toward her father, sensing what she couldn't yet name, that she'd just made a catastrophic mistake. Mr. Crane's reaction was everything I'd expected. The blood drained from his face. His fork, halfway to his mouth, hung suspended. He blinked, once, twice, calculating. He wasn't looking at some harmless relative anymore. He was staring at Vice Admiral Liora Keene, the flag officer who signed off on his company's billion-dollar contract. His voice dropped an octave. "Command, as in, I met his gaze. As in, the 7th Fleet. The fork slipped from his hand, clattering against fine china. The sound shattered the room. Mr. Crane, a man accustomed to controlling every room he entered, rose abruptly. Stiff, spine straightening in reflex. It wasn't respect for me as a woman. It was respect for rank, for the uniform he suddenly remembered wasn't mine to hide. Olivia's face went pale. Daniel's jaw tightened. My sister Evelyn sat frozen, her champagne glass trembling. "No need, Mr. Crane," I said lightly. "I was undercover. My family prefers it that way." Evelyn's painted smile cracked, draining into a blotchy shade of red. Then, like clockwork, Commander Vega appeared at the edge of the ballroom, immaculate in full-service dress whites, silver insignia gleaming. He cut through the stunned crowd, briefcase in hand. He saluted Mr. Crane first, protocol, then turned sharply toward me. "Admiral Keene," he said, voice crisp, carrying across the hall. Every whisper died. The ballroom stood at attention. "Sorry to interrupt, Admiral," Commander Vega said evenly. "You have a secure call with SecNav's office at 2100 regarding Project Atlas, and I have the preliminary review you requested." Silence rippled outward like a shockwave. Every so-called important guest my sister Evelyn had worked so hard to impress, executives, politicians, donors, stared at our table. The laughter, the string quartet, even the chatter of champagne glasses stopped mid-air. They all knew what those words meant. A secure call with the Secretary of the Navy wasn't something you joked about over dessert. Mr. Crane, who just moments earlier had been basking in his own importance, now stood stiff and sweating. The veins along his temple pulsed as his eyes darted to the locked briefcase in Vega's hand. "Admiral," he said, voice catching. "Project Atlas. Of course. Is there an issue?" He was asking as a CEO, begging as a contractor. I took a slow, measured sip of water, watching his panic settle. Then I set the glass down. "There might be, Mr. Crane," I said, shifting into the tone reserved for command briefings. "My office has concerns about your performance metrics and the latest deliverables." His breath hitched. "Frankly, the numbers are unacceptable," I continued, "but I'm confident your team can resolve them. if you're still the right contractor for the job. It wasn't a threat, it was procedure, executed publicly, cleanly, with every regulation on my side. Daniel finally broke the silence, his voice barely holding. Liora, Vice Admiral, what is this? I turned toward him slowly. This, I said evenly, is official United States Navy business. You are not read in. Please, don't interrupt again. His mouth fell open. Olivia sat frozen, her complexion the color of paper. And Olivia, I added softly, my words slicing through the air. A word of advice: before you mock someone's girly job again, make sure she doesn't control your father's billion-dollar contracts. Evelyn's hand trembled around her glass. Mr. Crane sank back into his chair. The party carried on around us, music faint and meaningless now. Because in that ballroom, for the first time, they all finally saw me. Commander Vega pulled out a chair for me. Across from us, Mr. Crane, his complexion pale but eyes sharp with new respect, sat down. The rest of the room fell away. Vega set a locked binder on the table, flicked it open, and just like that, in the middle of a glittering engagement gala, we entered my world. We discussed C5 ISTAR interoperability, logistics shortfalls, and the substandard performance metrics on Project Atlas. The tone was cold, clipped, and unmistakably professional. The language of command, the kind of conversation my family had never once cared to understand. I glanced up once. Across the ballroom, near the mountain of champagne flutes and white roses, I saw them. My sister Evelyn, my nephew Daniel, and his fiancée Olivia. They stood together, a small, stranded island of embarrassment. The important guests Evelyn had spent months trying to impress now lingered far away, stealing discreet glances toward our table, toward the uniformed officer in dress whites and the CEO leaning forward like a student before a stern instructor. For the first time in their lives, my family were the outsiders, spectators to a conversation they could neither follow nor control. After 20 minutes of technical review and quiet corrections, I closed the binder. Vega stood at parade rest behind me, silent and steady. Mr. Crane cleared his throat, voice subdued. Admiral Keene, you have my assurance. The metrics will meet standard by the end of the quarter. He hesitated, then glanced at Olivia, who stared down at the linen tablecloth. And my apologies for my daughter's words and mine. I didn't smile. I gave a single professional nod. See that you do, Mr. Crane. A year later, I stood on the sunlit tarmac of Naval Base San Diego. No chandeliers, no champagne. Just salt air, the smell of jet fuel, and the hum of engines. After a successful year leading the 7th Fleet, I was reassigned to head the Joint Pacific Operations Task Force based in San Diego. In full dress whites, I accepted command of the Joint Pacific Operations Task Force. The front row wasn't filled with relatives whispering for me not to make it weird. It was filled with people who'd earned their place. And as they applauded, it wasn't out of politeness. It was respect. It was the sharp, unified, thunderous sound of thousands of sailors and Marines standing in formation, their boots striking the concrete in perfect rhythm as the band played the anthem. This, I thought, this is my real family. Not the one I was born into, the one I earned. Built not on blood or pretense, but on competence, loyalty, and shared sacrifice. From my new office overlooking Pearl Harbor, I could see the massive carriers anchored in calm water, sunlight glinting off their decks like armor. It was quiet there, the kind of quiet that comes only after you've stopped needing anyone's approval. One afternoon, my new aide, Lieutenant Grace Holloway, stepped in holding a cream-colored envelope. "Ma'am," she said, "this came in the diplomatic pouch. It's not official, but it bears the Crane Defense Systems seal." Inside was a neatly typed letter from Mr. Crane himself. It was brief, formal, and meticulous. A note of thanks. Project Atlas had passed its subsequent review with exceptional results. Performance metrics now exceeded all expectations, and he credited my direct and clarifying oversight for the turnaround. It was professional, respectful, sincere, but folded within the envelope was a smaller handwritten card. P.S. I thought you might like to know, Olivia is no longer engaged to Daniel. She's working as an unpaid intern at a maritime nonprofit. She's learning a great deal. I read that line twice. She's learning a great deal. It wasn't just an update. It was an acknowledgement, a quiet apology. Weeks later, near Christmas, my personal phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Hey, Liora, are you coming home for Christmas? Mom and we get it now. We're proud of you. I stared at the screen. 5 years ago, those words would have broken me open with relief. I would have cried. Now, I felt nothing but calm. My worth was no longer theirs to define. I looked up at the framed photo on my desk. Me, on the bridge of the USS Resolution, surrounded by my command team, my real family. I archived the message, turned back toward the harbor, and smiled faintly. They once mistook my silence for weakness. But in my world, silence means a plan is already in motion. There were years when I stayed silent just to keep the peace, when I let others define who I was because it was easier than defending the truth. But silence doesn't protect you. It only delays the moment you finally stand up. If my story resonated with you, tell me what strength means to you. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and remind someone that quiet power is still power. And if life ever asks you to shrink, don't. Stand tall, stay steady, and remember, respect isn't demanded, it's demonstrated. Subscribe, and let's keep walking forward, together.